Okay, Paddy, thanks for the introduction. Yes, fortunately Gareth is down here because after last night's dinner he has food poisoning. I have to say I was a little bit nervous. That light's very strong, isn't it? I have to say I was a little bit nervous about giving this presentation. I would have been a lot more relaxed if I realised I'd been giving it in Paddy's living room. It's quite a nice environment. Slipper, cigar, something like that. Okay. Just to complete the biog, I am Ian Anderson. I work for Coventry University. I've been in the HE sector for 25 years. Some of you may know me from the e-commerce national user group, which I founded and chaired for a number of years in conjunction with WPM. I spent the first part of my life in higher education working in the finance department, where I finished as senior income manager for Coventry University. I then saw the light and decided to move into IT, and I'm currently the lead business analyst project manager and have responsibility for program management. The more astute of you will have already figured out this is a guy who spent half his working life in IT and half his working life in finance, and has probably, therefore, had his personality surgically removed. This may be the worst 40 minutes of the week. Hey, I didn't ask to be here. These guys invited me. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit today about the journey we've been on in terms of enterprise architecture, and really, as Paddy said, it's about really just trying to pull together a lot of the stuff that you may have heard this week, and particularly some of the stuff that was said today. It's the last presentation of the conference, other than, and it's the first time I felt the need to say this, I do recognise that there is parts of, some people think I look like the guy from Breaking Bad, but I am not the mentalist. And that's the first time I've ever felt the need to say that. So it's really just about pulling that stuff together, and it's about the journey that we've been on. I am going to start with three apologies. The first apology is, I don't know how far you travelled to get here, but less than 30 hours ago I was in Austin in Texas at the Koali Days. I can tell you at the moment the right-hand side of my brain is saying, listen fat boy, lie down and go to sleep. This may happen, but I appreciate that time is money. Throw a blanket over me, just carry on. It will be absolutely fine. The next thing is, the next apology is for those of you who consider yourselves to be ITIL specialists. I suspect there are many in the room. I may say things today that will make you want to put your head in your hands and weep slightly. I'm sorry about that, but I want you to take some pleasure in the fact that your discomfort will be nothing to that, and this is my third apology, to those who consider themselves to be enterprise architects. Now I say this slightly tongue-in-cheek, but actually with all these things, they are techniques, methodologies that we put in our toolbox, and we pull them out when we have a problem. We have a saying at Coventry, you may use it yourself, Apollo 13 solutions. You know, it's where you've got no time and resource, you have to use the things that are about you to deliver something. And that's what we've tried to do. This is about the journey that we've been on. It's a story with three beginnings. It doesn't yet have an ending. I'm not expecting it will have an ending for many years to come. It's about understanding the problem and identifying a solution. The title of the presentation has enterprise architecture in it, so there's going to be no surprises at the end. It's about implementing that solution and considering the future. The evolving university. Some of you will have seen the presentation given by my colleague Ian Dunn. I'm led to believe it was very good, and he changed it on the spot. Not everybody at Coventry University has the power to do that, I'm sorry. But it can be nobody who's been involved in the education sector for the last 10 years who won't be aware of the journey that Coventry University have gone on. There'll be things I put on here that you're already doing. But for us, it's been a journey. It's been a very quick journey. So in 2005, we were a single-site university. We are now multi-site. That manifested itself. We were a university. We are now university and colleges. We were UK-based. That's gone off slightly. We're UK-based, and now we're overseas campuses, partnerships, and joint ventures. We did little research, and our agenda going forward is about increasing the research. For all professional services, but particularly for Coventry University, what we found is, particularly for IT services, that we found that the vanilla services that we offered back in 2005 no longer meet the delivery that is required from the business in 2015. You know, at the basic level, if you offer a desktop support service or a desktop delivery service, it cannot be the same in Coventry as it can be on our London campus, and it's certainly not going to be the same in China and Turkey. In terms of research, well, back in 2005, we kept everything very tight. You didn't share anything. More and more, we're being told if you want to get research grants, you have to share that data. It's about open access. Collaborative working is something now. Collaborative working in 2005 was about getting off your butt, going next door and having a coffee with somebody. Now it's about working in real time with people around the world. Our colleges is an interesting one. That is something, believe it or not, in March we were told we're having a college. We had to deliver that for the September. Trying to put that into perspective and deliver all the services, the IT services, was a phenomenal challenge for us. And actually, whether we achieved it or not is debatable, but we did get 400 students that walked through our door. However, they're run on a very much a profit and loss basis. We deliver our service to them. They want to know exactly what that service is. They want to know exactly how much they're paying for it. They want to know what all their options are. That puts us into a different world. Okay. So that's the changing face of the modern university and how we as an ITS department have to meet that. Coventry University needs to replace its current student record system. That's what we have. Traditionally, it's this big box application. We built our own originally. We built it back in 1998 because of this massive 2YK problem that was going to engulf everything, and we were all going to die. But of course, that never really manifested itself. But we also need to change it because it's written in VB6. Does anybody have any VB6 developers that we can have? We'll give you £1 million. Does anybody have any? Because we can't get VB6 developers anymore. And that's going to. So as you can see, it's the big box. Sits within that the box are graduation and enrolment and curriculum management and all those things. So we went out to the market and we had a look around. Apologies to those suppliers in the room, but we don't actually think that that model fits the type of university that we're turning into. This group of companies that sits with the university at the top of the header, the main campus delivery, all the offshoots. What we think is going to happen is that we will build, beg, borrow and steal all the components to make up a student record system. And that's why we are very keen on what is the Koali delivery. I honestly don't believe, again, apologies, that we are going to be in the future happy to go out to these big suppliers to be absolutely tied in to purchasing these huge ERP systems that we will spend huge amounts of money on, that we'll spend huge amounts of money maintaining, that we will spend huge amounts of money on customizing. I honestly believe that the model that we will go to is already there because it's on your mobile phone. That you will go to an app store and you will pull down an enrolment system and you will pull down the graduation system that you want and you will pull down the curriculum management system. In fact, graduation, we talked about this last night, what you may do is, and you could probably do this already, is you would pull down an event booking system, you would pull down a ticket generation system, you would pull down a brochure printing system. And in fact, that's how you would build your student record system. Of course, if you do that, as been said this morning, you absolutely need to know what your architecture is, you absolutely need to align with the business, you absolutely need to know how your data is going to flow around that. So that's an interesting one. We're not there yet. Our final problem. I'm going to be honest with you here. Don't share this. A couple of years back, we had a major storage failure. We lost we had to bring down all the applications that we hosted on site, and subsequently because of that we had to bring down all the applications that we didn't host on site but linked to the systems applications that were hosted. As you can imagine, this resulted in a lot of this. That was anger, not people getting mullet haircuts, but it was the best picture I could find. In fact, as IT people, let me tell you, I'm going to tell you, and you'll get this, how serious this problem was. Those 5 words that no IT department wants to hear were heard shouted through our department. Fetch me the IT disaster recovery plan. The what? You know, the IT disaster recovery plan. Okay. And of course, we laugh about that, and we all have IT disaster recovery plans, don't we? And I can see lots of people at the moment scribbling stuff down on iPads and laptops. Because what we do is we have this IT disaster recovery plan, and every 5 years we have a major exercise bringing it all back up to date. And it's relevant for at least the next 3.5 hours. Now, so this thing was brought forth, and we looked at it, and it was of no use to us. Except for one thing. The one thing it had in it was a timeline. And it said if you suffer a major outage, these, at whatever time in the year, these are the services you need to bring back. And we were heading into our application period. And we said, right, this is the first thing that we will do. We will bring back our application process. And we did that. And we phoned the recruitment office and we said, we are the IT department. We are aware of this major outage. But we have let tour buildings and held back speeding trains, and we have returned to you the application service. And they said, no, you haven't. And we said, but we are the IT department. We have. And they said, bugger off, you haven't. And of course we hadn't. What we'd done is we bought back the application and the server that it sits on. But the whole service contained things like links to the agents in the fields. It required emails. There was stuff that they were doing that they needed to mail merge. There was stuff that they needed to do to put into spreadsheets. So they couldn't use it. It was time to take a step back. When we looked at this, we realised a couple of things. We realised that as an ITS department, we were good at information technology, hardware and software. And then apart the SAN thing wasn't all our fault, okay? What we were not so good at, that slide works well, we weren't so very good at the S in ITS. We weren't very good at we weren't very good at delivering services. So, what are we going to do? We decided that we would form an initiative. It would be called the ITS STEP Programme, Service Transformation Programme. STEP was quite important in that this was not going to be an ITIL implementation. And in fact, we had a consultant come in to us, and he said, I am an ITIL expert, but I can tell you now, if you want to do an ITIL implementation, I'm not going to work for you. He said, because pretty much they never work. So it'll be about taking small steps to transform the business. I think you'll agree in that sense that STEP is an excellent anagram. And clearly the person that came up with that was a genius, and probably pretty good looking too. So what we wanted to do is we decided that we would try and understand the service. So where do you go when you want to understand the service? ITIL. They tell us this. A means of delivering value to customers by facilitating outcomes customers want to achieve without the ownership of specific costs and risks. And we said, that is what we all do. And our customers said, we don't understand that. In fact, that's way too high level. We don't feel warm and embraced by that. So one of the academics said, look at this, what they've said at Yale. An IT service that is directly consumed by the end user to do their work and is something they asked for and recognised. And finance said, yeah, but that doesn't talk about costs and stuff. And then somebody gave us this. 30% of ITIL-based projects fail at defining a service stage. And we were going, do you know what? We recognise that because we've had 25 meetings coming up with a definition. We're not even at defining a service stage. So we'll park that and we'll start asking ourselves some questions. We asked ourselves these questions. You're going to have seen these all before. What does the business need in terms of IT delivery? Aligning IT and the business. I know it's way out there. It's blue sky thinking, but we're going to need to consider that. What elements make up an ITS service? If you've never done this exercise, my advice is to you, go and do it. I will give you one brief example from Coventry. We have a service set which is Comms and Collab. And part of that is that we offer mobile phones. The vanilla service is, we will give you a mobile phone and we will stick it on our network. Except, if you work overseas and you can come up with a better deal, what we'll do is we'll buy you the phone and you go with that deal. If that deal comes with a mobile phone and it's cheaper than the one that we could offer, you can take their mobile phone and go with their contract. Our Coventry University Enterprises, they only want us to buy the phones for them. London campus only want mobile phone advice, whatever the hell that is. And I lost interest when we got to Coventry University College. That is one service that we offer. My advice is you sit down, write your vanilla service, and then look at all the other flavours that you offer that. You will be stunned. How do we plan and understand technology changes better? What's the impact? Who's affected? Getting things right first time. As I said, I'm a master black belt at Six Sigma. I can talk to you forever on things being right first time. You know, they tell us that if you don't get it right first time, that there are plenty of figures and research that will show you that it costs between 30 and 70% of the original cost of the project to solve all the issues. Just to give you a quick example of something that happened to me yesterday, of a service. As I say, I flew in from Koali days. I flew in from Austin. I landed at Terminal 5 with BA. I was there for an hour. I then got on a plane to come to Edinburgh. When I walked down to get on the plane to come to Edinburgh, I said to the lady, "Is my case here? Because I have had lost luggage before." And she checked, and she said, "Yes, Mr. Anderson, your bag is on the plane." I arrived here at Edinburgh, and my luggage wasn't here. I'm not quite sure how that happens, because in this day and age, I thought people and luggage had to match, but hey, there we go. I then had to go and report that. And that involved a woman phoning London and Heathrow, and they had to go and find my bag. I've got a taxi driver waiting. He'd got a contract after me, which he then missed because of the delay of me being there. They then phoned the hotel to say that they would deliver it because they were going to have to. They'd found the bag, and they'd recruited a courier who was going to deliver the bag to the hotel. The hotel had no record of me because the conference had booked me. So what they did was that the people in Edinburgh then went back to BA and said, "Who is this Ian Anderson?" They said, "Well, the record that we have is it was booked through Key Travel." Key Travel said, "Well, actually, we work on behalf of Coventry University." You see what I'm saying? The amount of rework that was involved in that. Let me tell you something. If you fly with BA, there was 9 people on my flight who'd lost their luggage yesterday. 2 side issues to that. The first one is I was lucky enough to fly business class. So when my luggage was identified as missing, they let me go to the front of the queue. If you want to become a pariah in society, you go to the front of a missing luggage queue. How I am here this today is beyond me, and my knife is not riddled with back. Back is riddled with knife. That's nice. The other thing, true story, the woman said, "As you are a business class passenger, we will have things that you can take and you know, to get by until we find your luggage." And she rummaged around, and there wasn't a lot of stuff. And I said, "It's probably because you lose a lot of luggage." And she brought forward the one thing: shampoo. I have to say, by this point, I was getting a bit sarcastic, and I did say to her, "I'm not being funny, love, but unless that is Alpecin Regain, and by 5 o'clock you can guarantee that I'm going to look like one of the Jackson 5, you can shove it." But that's the idea about how getting things right first time. Proactive service delivery. How often, as an IT department, do you go out, talk to your business people and say, "We're looking at this technology. These are the things that we can do for you"? How do we make our services scalable? We've talked about that. I don't know whether Ian said it yesterday. I don't know how confidential it is, but we've just completed a 5-year strategy plan. The journey that we have been on in the last 10 years as a university will be nothing compared to the university that we are expecting to be in 5 years' time. How do we identify how business uses data? I'm glad Toby talked about that in the section in terms of EA. People say it doesn't sit in there. It absolutely does in terms of services. Because the analogy I would use is that the service is the body, data is the blood that flows around it. How can we effectively monitor our services? That's asterisk. If you go anywhere within our university and see that as a requirement, it has an asterisk against it. Why? One of the main reasons, it's the one thing our Vice-Chancellor asked for. But the other thing is, and Ian would have talked about this again yesterday, one of the reasons that Coventry has been so successful in climbing the league tables, I'm not going to have a debate on league tables with you, is through student satisfaction. We are consistently in the top 2 or 3 in terms of student satisfaction. And if there is a problem with teaching and learning, it is dealt with immediately. I cannot say that IT have supported that particularly well. We do not go out and we are not proactive in telling our students how our service is performing. We really need to do something about that. So the aims of the STEP projects in a nutshell. I'll skip through this, and I'm not going to have lots of EA diagrams, you'll be glad to know. As is, we need to identify the services ITS currently offer. We've talked about that, about trying to understand what we have. Identify the business services that ITS currently underpin and support. So it's about what does the business want and what do we do. So the 2B in enterprise language is to identify what business services ITS will need to underpin and support, and then identify the services ITS will need to offer to underpin and support what the business wants to do. It seems logical, but if you do that, you've absolutely got to know how what your services are, how they perform, how they operate. And then we're going to document everything. So, how are our services currently viewed? We did some sampling of this, and we talked to the BAs and project managers and said, when you go out and talk to people related to new development, just get a feel for how they relate and talk about a service. And this is what we found. That the business user will consider really the business process. So if you talk to somebody who processes cash, they will say, well, I take direct debit, I handle recurring car payments, somebody pays by cash, and they will say eventually that I stick it into the finance system. Those that have been here a bit longer or a little bit senior will talk a little bit about the application. From an IT perspective, the developer and application support will really very much focus on the application. Those who we found that have been here longer, just through saturation, will understand a little bit more about the business because they've just been in contact with these people over the years. The new people that we have coming in under developer and application support, the young guys, they tend to be very technical driven. So they're looking downwards. At the bottom, we have our infrastructure people. Their other view of the world is this. There is no world outside of infrastructure. You know that. How many times do you send your infrastructure? This man down here is wetting himself. He knows this. How many times do we send our infrastructure out, people out into the business? I accept there are many infrastructure people we do not want to send out into the business. I was saying last night, I'm sorry if you're one of these people. At Coventry University, the infrastructure team are affectionately known as the meerkats because this is how they spend their day. And that's what they do. Why is this? Very quickly, it's the historical structure of IT, lack of liaison with the business, lack of common language between IT and the business, poor historical documentation, poor change management process, lack of useful BI, etc., etc. Is there a solution? Very quickly, just throw this slide in because it needed to go somewhere. Coventry University became aware of the JISC initiative a few years ago, and we were part of that. And we work with people like Andrew, who's in the room somewhere. Hello, Andrew, at the back there, amongst others. And as part of that, we started to understand it. It was interesting that Toby used the term pretty picture, because that was the very first thing I ever said when I went to an EA meeting. Don't know what that's about, it's a pretty picture. We write our own meta model that some universities are still using, and we're actually going to rewrite that now that we have a better understanding of how to use EA. But then we started to observe what others were doing, and there aren't many, to be fair. Certainly the work that's been done at Bristol by Nicky Rogers under Luke, what Alistair Holmes is achieving at Lincoln, some of the work that's being done at Birmingham. So this was us going back to our toolbox and saying, okay, we have something in there that might be able to help us with this problem about understanding our services and all the interactions that we need to understand. Short story, we invested in a dedicated tool, we've allocated some dedicated resource, and we started to spread the word. And this is what's happened. This is pretty much the only EA diagram I'm going to show. This is our document management service. Can't believe that I left the word system in there, but there you go. We created this, and there's a reason why I'm going to use this diagram. that we created this and we put it in our repository. If you talk to anybody in our department about the document management service, what they will tell you is that the file stream system that we use is the be-all and end of all of it. From what I was saying from the other slide, it's if we talk to our business process people, they'll tell us that they basically just stick documents into it. What they won't tell you is for it to work effectively as a service, it must be linked to our student record system. It must be linked to email. It must be linked to printing and scanning. That's the service. We put that up. That was one of the first that we did. One day, Anna Gray, who heads up our applications team, walked in and said, "You know that document you published on document management? Can we have a copy of that? HR want to do document management, and we actually think we can take that and take the system, because this is only used for students, we can take that and HR can use it." And we said yes. So Anna took that away, and the next thing, she was having a meeting with HR where that was on the wall, and they were discussing it, and what they were saying effectively is, what we can do is take out Universe, which is a student record system, put the HR system in there, and for the most part that will probably work. I went to the next meeting, and they decided that what they needed was actually to get Steve Rogers, who was our technical guy, in the room, and he would talk about what the feasibility of that was and what were the issues. I was in a meeting with a business user, application owner, and our technical people. I know, we are going to have English Heritage put a blue plaque on the wall, because that is the first time that I'd ever known that to occur. All of a sudden, that was starting to happen. Our services were being viewed differently. Our users, we are going to accept, are never going to be that interested in infrastructure. But, whether they like it or not, all the IT people now have to be interested in the system and the service holistically. Because they can't get away from it. Because we've shown them, there it is. So, what are the expected benefits? Well, when I say expected benefits, some of these things are absolutely materialising. We understand the service. Wow. Managing the service. We can start to manage the service more effectively. I think, as I said earlier, we will move to an environment where we will have, unfortunately, less developing type roles in our organisation, and we will have much more business analysts, project managers and service managers, because they will be managing all the bits that we are pulling together. We can then apply ownership. We can start to identify costs. So when Coventry University College comes to us and say, we want to take that service from you, how much is that going to cost? We have that diagram, we have something that we can hang off and say, these are all the elements that are involved in that service. But probably, the vanilla essence will be free. But if you want the other parts of it, we can start to figure out how much it's going to cost for you to take that from us. We can plan enhancements holistically, not parochially. So that is a case that when, how many times where, you have an issue, all of a sudden somebody from the business phones up and says, something that was working yesterday isn't working today, and it's just because somebody's tweaked something, and they've said, don't worry, it doesn't need to go through a change management process, it'll be fine. Monitoring the service, the thing that the Vice-Chancellor asked for. Well, that was interesting. Going back to Steve Rogers, our technical guy, we got Steve in to build this bottom layer for us because, quite frankly, that was the hardest layer. Steve said, that's interesting, he said, because with all those elements there, they're represented in our Service Centre Operating Management, SCOM. And he said, I have agents on all of those. And he says, if I link those all together in that system, and he said, actually, I can take some of these because they're websites and they're interfaces and such like, I can put agents on those. What I can do is start monitoring that as a service, not as the individual components. And that's just a snapshot of part of what comes out of our SCOM system in terms of now what's in there relating to the document management system. That's interesting in a number of ways. It's interesting because, A, that we, for the first time, understand how a service is performing. It's also interesting because if you'd have asked us previously, we'd have said that the service level arrangement for document management is based on what the supplier gave us, which is, I don't know, 99.99%. Well, actually, now what we're saying is that we can identify that that service is only as strong as its weakest link. And if we did, and we don't, we decided that every Wednesday, because all the students are out, we would take down the printers and clean the jets and the drums and such like for 2 hours, then clearly the service level agreement cannot be 99.9%. It also shows us that we're starting to have a conversation where previously, if a big component failed, we go, we fixed the big component, that's where we need to spend our money. We said, well, actually, now we can look at it and say, well, that big component, as big as it is and as flashy, may only affect 1 or 2 services. But there's something down here. This little thing keeps breaking, and that's actually taking out 25 services every time that happens. So we can say, where do we spend our money? Where do we get the biggest bang for our buck as an IT department to help the business? In terms of improving developments, well, if we can document that stuff and have a service there, we've already done the initial as-is. As a business analyst, I know that for the most part in our team, if I was to send somebody out to look at our exams process, and they did that today, if we had to go back and look at that in 8 months' time, we couldn't guarantee that the work that we'd done then would still be relevant, because people go and change things. We're trying to build that if we build these EA models, they will go through proper change management, so you can guarantee that if somebody wants to talk about something, we can give you a representation of what that service is. It's a starting point for SOA, data warehousing and APIs and web services. We now have a representation of where we're starting to share data, how things are starting to move around our system. Hugely important, again, if you're looking at that model that we talked about earlier, about pulling down applications and systems and linking them together to build the things that you want. And it's an opportunity to do things like create interface catalogs and data dictionaries. There was a really interesting meeting of the EA group in Bedfordshire earlier this year that I think that Luke and John organised, and there was a lot of chatter on the forums afterwards about data dictionaries and interface catalogs. Why? Well, what we can do with our tool, we use Biz Design, by the way, must give them a quick mention, is that if we take it down a level, we can say, well, here's our student record system. Here are some of the interfaces. Where these lines are, we can put links onto that. It'll take you down to an interface catalogue. So we can start to understand how we are sharing data around the organisation. And of course, attributes of interface catalogues is data. And so we can then start developing our data dictionaries. Just to go back to the slide I made earlier. So, the historical structure of IT. What we're trying to do now is get people to talk to one another because they now have this single reference point. Like liaison with the business. Well, that's happening because people are starting to understand that if they make a change within IT, that does affect the rest of the business. Lack of common language between IT and business. Poor historical documentation. With those two, a picture paints 1,000 words. It's as simple as that. People will not read huge long documents about service design, but they will look at a picture and they will try and understand it. I put this in bold. Poor change management processes, that is absolutely key to this whole thing. I have absolutely no desire to send my BAs to go out and map all the services in the university if we do not have proper change management, because I don't want them to map a service today for somebody to change it tomorrow and not go through that process, because the whole exercise will be scrap. And there is an element that we are still working on that, but we are making progress, and that will be one of the biggest things that when we finalise that, we will move forward much more quickly. Lack of useful BI. Well, now we're creating BI. We're creating it through our service centre. We're understanding much more about our service, the holistic view of it, etc., etc. This last slide I just threw in because Sue phoned me up and said, Ian, where's your bloody presentation? Oh, Christ, it's not finished. Let me just put this slide together, so I'm going to throw it out there. It's still early days, but the work we're doing it is initially we are now understanding the value of EA at a much more senior level. We are getting technical and user buy-in. We are now getting people coming to us and saying, we need to EA this service. And we will very shortly permanently resource the process of EA. So I hope that's been some value to you. I hope that's what I've tried to do is sort of pull together sort of the presentations we have this morning from an operational sense. I'm Ian Anderson. Thanks very much.
Questions, if there's any questions for Ian.
Hi, I was recently at the head-up workshops about trying to understand your data and your data management. And I could be mistaken, but I think the consultant that was facilitating that workshop advised that you don't spend too much time documenting as-is processes, because the first change you make changes all the as-is processes, because it has repercussions across the whole thing. So yes, get a high-level view of what your as-is is, but then look to the future about where you want to be. That made sense at the time, until, of course, looking at the diagrams you were showing there and realizing that, well, if you were to properly document what you've done there, then you could take a step back and see that maybe just by moving this component from here to here, you would transform everything. So you could actually see where you could make most effect. So do you have any comment on that in terms of the balance between doing too much documentation of where you are and actually understanding where you are?
Yeah. Okay, what I would do is, it's a very good question, because it's a good point that's been discussed in quite a number of forums. My advice is you have three levels there. You have the business level, the application level, the technical level. Do not spend a huge amount of time on the business level, because you do not control it. You know, if we give a student invoicing facility, from the interface level, we lose control of it. If finance want to use that in a particular way and use document merging in Excel and that outside of that, to be honest with you, that's fine. We don't have any control over it. What we can do is that we can get them to sign off that that is the process as it was at that point. What we do have is we should have huge amounts of control at everything that happens underneath that level, and they are the things that we should control. And I absolutely believe that you should document the as-is, because if you don't know what you're doing, how do you know what you're going to do, and how are you going to get there? No, sorry, it's more about the gap analysis. How are you going to identify the thing that you need to do to get to where you're going? So I think the as-is is important, but it's the thing that always gets left behind. But I think there's value in it. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Moving on.
So for me, it's whether I spend time analysing all our business processes into the registered services, when we know that making a few changes might change many of them, and then we have to review that documentation for the as-is, because the as-is is now no longer the as-is, it's the as-was. You spend a lot of time reviewing what you have, and maybe not enough time.
Yeah, and the premise of what I was saying is EA, ITIL, Prince2, they're methodologies. Decide what you want to do, pull the bits out that are going to work for you, and if what you want to achieve doesn't require you to do huge amounts of as-is, then don't do it. That's basically it. Whatever works for you. I'm not being evangelist.